Hi there. I wanted to talk to you if you're a subscriber. I just want to talk to those of you who are subscribed to this channel. And if that's you, well, let me begin by saying I'm glad you clicked on this, and I'm glad you haven't clicked off yet. And thank you in advance for hanging out until the very end. This is just gonna be me rambling for a little while, just so you know. You can click off now if you're not in the mood for that. I came to a realization recently, and I wanted to share it. I wanted to share that with you. I just came to this realization recently, a couple days ago. This was shortly, I don't know, this was within 24 hours after uploading the most recent video on this channel. The counter-argument to protests need not be civil. And I read a lot of just as I always do when the protest need not be civil video was put up. I kept up with all the comments, not just the comments, but the comments on the comments, arguments that took place between subscribers who were commenting on it. And over and over and over again, people were saying one of many things, that this video didn't seem like it was an actual counter-argument. Other people said that they appreciated how Noah was scrutinized, but it still didn't seem like it belonged on the channel because it was just focused heavily on him and not on the argument itself. And other people said that the video itself was full of straw men. How ironic, because it was Noah himself was accused of propping up straw men, and there were a couple of pretty good arguments made as to how that video didn't understand the argument that Noah was putting forward or trying to put forward. And this resulted in a realization of that this was not a one-off. I went back through all the videos that were made and published on this channel this past year. 2018, most of the content that was uploaded to this channel in this year has focused heavily on the people making the arguments and not on the arguments themselves. I've been doing this all year. Most of 2018, most of the videos, the arguments that have been published on this channel keep circling back to the person who initially made the argument, and it dwells on mistakes that individual made, rather than just staying focused on the argument itself. And it finally came to a head with this latest video, with this counter-argument, which it wasn't even. Two protests need not be civil. This was rock bottom. I mean, this video completely dropped the ball. The ball was being partially dropped over and over again throughout this entire year, but it was completely dropped on this video. The argument at hand was not even entertained. I just picked on Noah for 10 minutes, and that doesn't accomplish anything. I mean, I call this a realization because that's what it was. It just occurred to me after reading the comments that I'm satisfied all year long. I'm not really proud of anything that I've produced this entire year. Because when I originally started this channel about 3.5 years ago now, I wanted to make videos that challenged arguments, which is why I called the channel Counter-Arguments in the first place. There were a lot of arguments out there that I thought were unreasonable, and it got under my skin. It kind of just annoyed me a little bit that there were bad arguments, and I wanted to challenge them. Just for me, just to satisfy myself, just for my own sake. And as the channel grew, I don't know. There's something happens when you know you have an audience. When you don't think anybody's watching, some of your best stuff happens. But when you know that people are paying attention, I should only speak for myself. That was a close one. I almost spoke in general. I'll just speak for myself. Knowing that there was an audience, knowing that tens of thousands of people would see what I made, my mind I guess it gradually drifted from, well, let's just make something that's useful and something that I'm proud of and something that's just good. And instead, it gradually turned into, this person here did a bad job making an argument. If I point it out, a lot of people will know that this person made a bad argument. and then wahahaha, they'll comment on that video and they'll tell them. But again, to repeat the word realization, this just occurred to me a couple days ago. I wasn't aware of this all this time. And I went back through the entire library on this channel, and a lot of the videos that were made this year do this. Particularly, I mean, one in particular is this, the counter-argument to You Can't Explain That, which is just focused on what Bill O'Reilly said on his show. The whole gist of the video is that he moved the goalpost. That's it. It's not really a counter. There's no counter-argument in there. These two videos in particular, Lacey Green making an argument that people who claim that they were raped or sexually assaulted should be believed, and the argument that Roaming Millennial made as to why 16-year-olds, or Lauren Chen, is that her name? She goes by her real name now. She didn't then. I'll just call her Roaming Millennial. This video, which countered the argument that Roaming Millennial made as to why 16-year-olds shouldn't vote. If you watch these videos in particular, they do, the argument that they put forward is challenged, but time and time again it keeps circling around, and it keeps, the video keeps coming back to them, the people who made the argument, and it keeps scrutinizing little things that they did, little mistakes that they made that do not necessarily undermine the argument. They're flaws that the individual who presented the argument made. So if a human being does something unreasonable, it's unreasonable, and if that individual is fairly criticized, then they're fairly criticized. But that's not what I wanted to. That's not what I wanted to do with this channel. Yes, people are going to articulate arguments in lousy ways. Of course, that's going to happen. And there's too much of this already. I mean, this has been going on for years and years. There are so many channels on YouTube that people will go and deliberately find bad versions of arguments, and they'll challenge the bad version of the argument. And they might do it in a good way. They might, there are a lot of channels who will find lousy versions of arguments, people who just didn't know how to make the argument well, and they bungle it, and they make all sorts of mistakes along the way, and somebody will find that bad argument, and then they'll point out everything that's wrong with it. And I guess there's a time and place for that. There is value in identifying that somebody committed a logical fallacy, for instance. There is value in identifying a mistake that is made, but what happens so often on YouTube is that people will they'll challenge a shit version of an argument, and then they'll just tip their hat and consider it job jolly well done. I wanted to avoid, I didn't want to do that when I started this channel. I just wanted to make an argument that could be used to challenge another argument. I didn't want to get hung up on someone's argument. I didn't want to get hung up on this version or that version of an argument. I just wanted to challenge the argument. Unfortunately, I strayed away from that. And it only took me this entire year. We're in December now. It only took me all year to figure this out. And it's embarrassing. It is. It's kind of like if you put a pair of pants on the wrong way and you don't realize it immediately. It's embarrassing, but I nevertheless admit it. And I'm sorry. And I want to thank you if you have been commenting. Not just if you commented on the last video, the protest video with Trevor Noah. If you commented on that critically, if you expressed why you thought that video was not up to snuff, I thank you. But I also thank you if you comment on any of the videos on this channel at all. Because I read the comments. I want to know whether I'm flying straight or not. I want to know whether or not the content on this channel is of quality and is useful to people. And I wouldn't have come to this realization if you were not commenting on these videos, and if you were not questioning the way they were made and what was accomplished or not accomplished in them. Okay, not everybody's criticism is constructive, and not everybody's kind and sweet and lovely, but nevertheless, I thank you for pointing out that something had gone wrong. I thank you if you did it once. I thank you if you've been doing it over and over again. When I had this realization, I went back in the library and started watching some old videos, older videos. One of them in particular was the counter-argument to global warming is a hoax. I think this was one of the first videos ever. It was made in 2015, but it was revised in 2016, and it's better now. And this was well before. This was when the channel was still on the rails, and arguments were still being challenged, and not the people who made them. And I went back and watched it, and I was sort of caught slightly off guard by how impressed I was with it and how proud I was of it. And I just couldn't help but think to myself that if I had decided to challenge this argument this year, the video begins with Senator Jim Inhofe, and he has a snowball, and he argues that, well, because it snowed, the global climate is probably not rising because it snowed here in Washington, D.C. today in February. Go figure. And I could just see it. If this argument was challenged this year in 2018, I might have just gotten hung up on Inhofe. It would have just been, hey, Senator, there's a difference between weather and climate, false equivalence, and the video probably wouldn't have gone any further than that. It would have gotten hung up on the version of the argument that Inhofe made, rather than just challenging the argument that global warming is not occurring, or that humans don't have an effect. And the video probably wouldn't have gone on to show any animated line graphs or pie charts. You know, it would have just picked on Inhofe for making a bad argument, which he did, but you don't want to see that. That's boring. That's not productive. It wouldn't have done anything to just point out how one person made a lousy attempt to argue that global warming isn't happening. Another one of the very first videos to be published on this channel was the argument against Islamophobia. I think this is another video that has been amended and revised and republished, I think, in early 2017, but originally it was published in 2015. Just a few months after the channel was started. I think it was just the 7th video that was made, and you wouldn't know this because I never said it to anybody, but that video originally was going to be a joke. It was going to be just a dumb. It was just going to be a humorous, like, I don't know, 45-second, minute-long video, something like that. What I was going to do, basically the only thing that I was going to do in that video was just show the clip of Ben Affleck on Real Time telling Bill Maher and Sam Harris that their criticisms of Islam and the Muslim world were racist. And all I was going to do in response was say, this argument is invalid because Islam is not a race. And that was it. And that was just that was going to be the entire video. That's how it started. And back then the channel just had 190 subscribers. So I was just doing it to amuse myself. But sure enough, when I opened up the Word document and I started writing, I wrote a second paragraph, and then a third paragraph, and then a fourth, and a fifth. And the next thing I knew, I had 3-4 pages full of arguments. I didn't even mean to do it, but I ended up writing what ended up being the argument against Islamophobia, the term, the concept, the application. Within 24 hours, the channel went from having 190 subscribers to 1,000. And somehow the video got around. It was tweeted by a couple of prominent people. It's the reason why this channel has a Twitter account. And when I compare that video to this most recent one that was put online, that seems like a pretty good. That juxtaposition seems to drives it home pretty well for me about how I strayed away from what I wanted to do. And looking back, in 2016 and 2017, I'm pretty darn proud of most of the videos that were made in 2017. I think that might have been the best year for the channel. Some of my favorite videos were made that year. There were a lot of hits in 2016 as well, but even then, I caught myself getting hung up on people making bad arguments rather than bad arguments. I think this is a good example right here. This Incorrect Answers episode, what is white privilege? That's an early example of this problem, where basically all that happens in this video is that DeRay McKesson goes on the Late Show, and he makes a really vague and empty explanation of what white privilege is, and all I do is explain why it wasn't a good answer to the question of what white privilege is. And I just I look back and then thought nothing was really accomplished in that video. It was just one person gave one bad answer to a good question. It's got over 500,000 views. It doesn't achieve anything. And like I said before, there is a value in pointing out mistakes that people make, and there's value in pointing out that someone made a logical fallacy. I think a good example of that would be this argument, the counter argument to the universe being it couldn't have been an accident, the fine-tuning argument. At some point in this video, it's pointed out the fallacy of personal incredulity is cited, along with begging the question. And I think that this is a particularly good example of citing a fallacy, not in relation to a particular person, not saying that first name, last name committed this fallacy, but rather that a particular argument relies on a fallacy. If you're familiar with the fine-tuning argument, if you're familiar with the argument that the universe was not an accident, God must have created it, you don't have to focus on anyone in particular. That argument fundamentally relies on personal incredulity. These are just some of the things that I sort of reflected on in the last few days. I went back. I've gone back and I've watched almost all of the videos that I've ever published on this channel. Most of them older videos. A lot of the arguments and the counter arguments that were made in 2015, 2016, 2017, they managed to sort of remain away, sort of keep themselves at a distance from the people who were presenting the arguments and stay focused on the arguments themselves. But this year, 2018, I unknowingly drifted away from this. And I ended up making a lot of content that dwelled heavily on people and did not dwell heavily enough on the arguments. And so you could say, and again, I wouldn't say this, you don't have to say this, we don't have to be dramatic about this, but if we did want to be dramatic about this, we could say something like the title of this channel was sort of betrayed. The title of the channel is Counterarguments. Not pick on people who didn't make good arguments, and not just consider, and not just, and certainly not to consider an argument defeated because you defeated a bad version of it that was made by somebody. Man, it took me long enough to figure this out. I'd wish I figured it out a little sooner, but better now than never. And in hindsight, I guess in a roundabout way, I'm thankful that I produced this video and put it online, because apparently I really had to make a video where the argument at hand was just not challenged at all, and the person who made it was just scrutinized up and down, left and right, without the issue itself actually being entertained at all. I had to produce a video that bad to finally realize the error that I had been making all year long. I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to make any more videos that keep getting hung up on the people who made the arguments. This channel ought to be challenging arguments, the best version of them, as they exist. This channel used to do that, and recently it hasn't been. If it hasn't been doing it well, it hasn't been doing it at all. It's kind of poetic in a way that this should be realized as the year is winding down, because then it gives me the opportunity to say something like 2019 is not going to be like this, but it's not. Next year, arguments are going to be challenged. People are not going to get picked on for bungling an attempt to make an argument. Arguments are going to be challenged, and maybe at some point I'll circle back around to this issue of protests being civil. Maybe not. Don't quote me on that. I don't know if I will. I'd like to, because it would be nice to revisit and actually deal with the issue. But as for the rest of 2018, this channel is going to close out 2018 with something different. I'm working on something out of the ordinary. I'm not going to tell you what it is right now. I'm going to leave you in suspense on purpose, because you'll see soon enough. It'll be done. It'll be on the channel before the year is over, so keep an eye out for it this month. Other than that, I just want to tell you that I'm sorry that I drifted away from what I wanted to do on this channel, and I want to thank you for criticizing this channel and for questioning me, for questioning the motivation behind why some of these videos were made. Look, this is the kind of crap that can happen when someone's just chugging along all by themselves and no one else is in the room to question them for them. That's why I've always religiously kept up with the comments on whatever the latest video on the channel was, because it's just me and my desk. And if I start losing my way, who's going to notice other than you? Well, you did notice. Some of you did. Some of you didn't, but that's okay. I'm not going to fault anyone for not criticizing a channel they like. I just want to thank you if you did criticize this channel and you did scrutinize the content, because you helped me figure out that I didn't put my pants on the right way. And I've been walking around all year with them on backwards. And I would have never figured it out by myself. I would have only figured it out if you had said something. So thank you for saying something. And let's hope that that the content on this channel not only gets focused again, but stays focused. So if you are still watching this video, if you didn't get bored with it, if you didn't mind listening to this rambling, I thank you for that too. I just wanted to touch base with you and let you know that I'm now aware of what I was doing, and I'm going to try my damnedest to make sure it doesn't happen anymore.